really excited to be joined for this next half hour by my special guest, Jarrod Anderson, recently declared candidate for the Wisconsin State Assembly District 19. Welcome, Jarrod.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Heck yeah, really great. We met just last week at the Red Cross Gala, happened to sit next to each other, which is not everybody, those big events and things aren't always a great time, but they're important, right? It's fundraising for some major charities. But on occasion, you get to sit next to somebody really fun, and I was fortunate enough to sit next to you. Now, I didn't know until you were going to come on the show that you worked for the Red Cross in North Dakota. Tell folks a little bit about that.
Yeah, I sure did. So I was the executive director of the Red Cross of Western North Dakota. And this was back around 2014. And I really loved it. I've always been involved in nonprofit healthcare focused organizations, but this is the one that really like sparked my love for that sort of thing. And so I oversaw the government relations for that chapter. I oversaw all of the development and fundraising. But most importantly, I oversaw the disaster cycle services. So that meant that me and my staff of volunteers were actually showing up outside of people's homes after they'd burned down, with food and water and stuffed animals and blankets so they could feel normal in that moment. You know, it's a devastating thing, but it takes the right kind of person to do. And I really, really enjoyed that job.
Now, are you from North Dakota, Jarrod?
So I was born in Sioux City, Iowa, which is like a little
Okay.
slaughterhouse town. But I moved up to Fargo when my dad was hired to redevelop the downtown in Fargo.
Yes.
And so we moved around a lot. He was a downtown developer that was hired by a lot of different cities to consult or come in and bring folks back downtown, as he liked to say.
Very cool. He would have some common philosophy with former Milwaukee Mayor John Norquist, who is a big proponent of walkable downtowns and walkable cities.
That's right.
So you are truly a Midwesterner in that you have lived all over the Midwest.
Yeah. Yeah. Every state that has a Culver's I've lived in, I think.
I love it. I still am a Kopp's custard purist,
Mm.
the OG of the custard scene here in southeastern Wisconsin. What eventually brought you to Milwaukee, Jarrod?
You know, it was my wife. So Ellen Anderson, formerly Ellen Cranberg, is from Glendale. She went to Nicolet, and she charmed me in law school. We met on the first day, and I was pretty much obsessed with her ever since I met her. And she's a better lawyer than me for damn sure. She works at Quarles and Brady here downtown where we live. And when back in 2018, she said, "Hey, you got to come check out Milwaukee." And I said, "All right, I'll go wherever you go." And we showed up here just in time for all of the festivals, Summerfest, and it was definitely love at first sight.
Yeah, it is a beautiful city. I'm the city of Milwaukee's own visitors bureau. When I run into folks that are visiting, I give
Yeah.
them the rundown of all of the places to hit. Certainly coming during festival season is a highlight. Now, here in Milwaukee, what have you been up to other than deciding to run for assembly?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, like I said, I've always been involved in nonprofit healthcare, and I got a really great opportunity to become the attorney for Common Ground Healthcare Cooperative, so CGHC for short. But Common Ground has been the largest provider of individual ACA health insurance for the last 10 years. And this is high quality, low cost health insurance for people who need it most. I simply love our mission. Our mission. It's about people, not profit. This is about making sure that when folks need healthcare, they're not worrying about being stuck with a $10,000 bill. I mean, it's an amazing organization that I'm fortunate to be a part of.
So tell folks a little bit, what is Common Ground? Many of us have heard the name, but not everybody knows who Common Ground is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and Common Ground has a couple of different entities, I should say. So, Common Ground of Eastern Wisconsin is an organizing entity headed by my neighbor Bob Connolly. But then 10 years ago, or almost 11 years ago now, there was an idea to kind of redefine and redevelop how health insurance was delivered in Wisconsin. And that was the inception of the idea for Common Ground Healthcare Cooperative, which, like I said, is an ACA health plan that has been around making sure that individuals, especially early retirees or low income individuals, have access to health coverage. And then recently, I helped form the Common Ground Healthcare Foundation, which is a brand new entity. I'm the chairman of the board, and we have devoted about $500,000 to local healthcare focused nonprofits, doing things like buying up and paying down medical debt, funding programs that provide sanctuary for folks who have recently escaped human trafficking, rehabilitation programs for folks who are trying to get over opioid addiction. That's like my most recent project.
That's incredible. Certainly work that we here in southeastern Wisconsin need.
Yeah.
For if somebody's listening and they don't have health insurance, tell them how to access Common Ground Healthcare Cooperative and where they can go to find out more.
Yeah, you can go to commongroundhealthcare.org. And if you're if you have a qualifying event, and you have an open enrollment period, then it's a really good time for you to find us. But otherwise, open enrollment is in November, and we hope you choose us. It's a great health plan. Once it's different because it's a cooperative, right? So a lot of times you become a member of a health plan and you are simply, a customer. But in Wisconsin, you get to be a member of a cooperative, which means that you get a chance to vote on referendums and make sure that your voice is heard in terms of what you want from your healthcare. So I love that about it too.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So tell everybody where does the 19th Assembly District cover, because we just got new maps. So if people aren't sure if they're in the 19th Assembly District, tell folks where the district boundaries are.
Yeah, the new maps have certainly confused a lot of these elections. So thankfully, the 19th is largely unchanged, and it goes from Edgewood Avenue up north, all the way down to Oklahoma Avenue down south, pretty much all on the eastern side of the river over to the lake. So it's big. It's the east side, downtown, Bayview, and the Third Ward.
That's a huge swath. Very, very interesting set of communities with all kinds of different interests. You're going to be pounding a lot of pavement.
That's right.
I suspect. Now, I teased our conversation this afternoon a little bit by mentioning the fact that you're actually running against an incumbent Democrat in that district. Why did you choose to run? What's bringing you into the political forum?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it has everything to do with the fact that I really wanted to see responsible advocacy for my community. And what I mean by that is, I've been an advocate for my entire career. Even before I was in law school, I was an advocate at the Red Cross doing government affairs for them. I worked in the Senate for a while. And folks need advocates. They need people to stand up for them when there are, there's a million things that could be happening, but we need to focus on the things that need to happen for our community. And when I looked around and I saw that we have, a huge population that just simply wasn't getting the representation that it needed in Madison, I wanted to raise my hand and say, you know what, I think we can do better. I think that we can send somebody who wants to work with people, build community, build programs to enhance folks' access to the services that they need.
And you mentioned that there are groups sort of being left out of the representation with the current incumbent. Who do you think is not being served by the current Democratic incumbent?
It's a good question. And I think, the argument can be made for a lot of different people. But in particular, right now, I've been disappointed with the current representative spending time at the UWM encampment, which is where the Palestinian protest is occurring. Now, I fundamentally believe that everyone has their right to make their voices heard when it comes to the foreign policy issues at bay. But to hold office hours for this district from behind the lines of a protest when a lot of your district is Jewish, It doesn't make sense to me. That makes sure that most of your constituency feels silenced when they want to speak to you the most. That doesn't seem like leadership to me.
In the interest of full disclosure and transparency on my end of the microphone here, the current incumbent for the 19th Assembly District is Ryan Clancy. Representative Clancy and I worked together in his prior capacity as a county board supervisor, so I'm familiar with some of Mr. Clancy's positions and approach. On your website, one of the things that you noted as to why you're running, you wrote this, quote, being an assembly person means safeguarding public trust with a focus on serving constituents over political grandstanding. I have a particular term for this that I use repeatedly on my show, and it's called performative politics. I'm not talking about the theater that is campaigning or the theater that is politics, necessarily so, right? What I mean when I say performative politics is very specific. I mean the use of power simply because you can, power for power's sake, using leverage for leverage sake, and or they often occur in combination, making an argument or taking a position not based on some good faith belief that you can actually put that position or argument into policy and get it enacted. Instead, you're making an argument or taking a position simply to raise your own profile, to get more media coverage. Do you think that performative politics, or as you put it, political grandstanding, is something that your opponent could be, frankly, held accountable for?
So I do. But more importantly, I think that it's always bad for constituents. I think it's always bad for a community. The biggest thing that I want to see out of my representative is policymaking, right? We're not hiring a politician. We're hiring a policymaker, right? And to do that, it requires you to be good with people, to want to build community, to want to know your neighbor, and also to want to work with the other folks that are in the assembly. This is a job that is based around building majority, building consensus. And if you can't do that, or if on principle you're saying, you know what, I don't want to work with anyone because they don't have it right, that's not what this body is for. This body is for making legislation to help Wisconsinites. And that's what we want to do. That's why we need an advocate in the 19th, not a politician.
Your opponent has said some, I think a mild word to use would be controversial statements about police and policing. In fact, I believe he said that there was no moral value or no value. There is nothing redeemable about anybody who is a police officer. What's your response to that?
Yeah, when Ryan said that the police have no dignity and value, I hid in my closet. There is always an opportunity for challenging our governmental officials, the representatives of our society. There is never, ever a reason to demean the folks that put their lives on the line to keep us safe. Okay. Now, we can talk about what we need to do to build a safer community, to make sure that we have what we need to be safe, but we should never demean the folks that defend it for us. That's a hard line for me.
My guest this half hour is Assembly candidate for the 19th District, Jarrod Anderson, lawyer, public health advocate. I'm so happy to have him. We're going to take just a couple of messages. We're going to be right back, and I'm going to ask Jarrod a little bit more about the particular issue areas that are the focus of his campaign. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. I'm Maggie Daun. You're listening to the Civic Media Network. Welcome back, Wisconsin. I'm Maggie Daun. You're listening to the Civic Media Network. I'm joined this half hour by candidate for Wisconsin State Assembly District 19, running against an incumbent Democrat. We got a comment on the text line. I was asking you about some one of, if not the most controversial statement that your opponent made, basically vilifying all police officers and saying that there's no dignity or value in any police work. And you were speaking about the fact that vilifying any group of people, especially folks that work to protect our communities, doesn't help reach meaningful policy, doesn't help enact or create meaningful policy that actually impacts the constituents. One of our texters had this to say, and you were speaking about compromise and being able to work across the aisle. He said, good luck making good policy if the state government remains Republican dominated. And I just wanted to get your reaction to that, Jarrod.
Well, that's been the issue, hasn't it, Maggie? Like we have not had the opportunity to do any policymaking because we haven't had a chance, right? We've had unfair maps. And even here in the 19th, we always knew that we were going to send a Democrat, but we knew that their job was going to be to go and defend the veto. And that was the state of affairs for like the last 13 years. But guess what? We have new maps, we have fair maps, and we have a chance this year to actually take the assembly, right? So there's a strategy to make sure that we have a Democratic majority going forward. And if not this year, then maybe in another 2 years. But we are closer now than ever to being able to do some good policymaking. And that is why we need serious policymakers. We don't need folks that are going to grandstand or be self-righteous or try to make a stand for principle. We need folks that want to go and do the work. This is our opportunity. And that's why now is the time.
Yeah, I think there's a really important point there. One is as the margins decrease, right, as even if there is a Republican majority, either in the Assembly and or the Senate, if those margins are closer, if there's no supermajority in the Assembly, that enables compromise because, again, you have to build coalitions. And there are a large swath of issues where Wisconsinites have deep levels of agreement,
yes,
and not disagreement. In fact, I would argue that on most of the stuff that impacts us to the greatest extent on a day-to-day quality of life basis, the vast majority of Wisconsinites agree. And so I couldn't agree with you more, Jarrod, when you say that you need someone who isn't basically a clown engaging in a circus-like performance to get attention for themselves, which these are not your words, they are mine. Ryan Clancy engages in a circus-like act to garner attention. And one of the things that I found most disturbing during my time as Milwaukee County's Corporation Counsel was that we need to be able to have informed, engaged, and nuanced discussions about many of these challenging issues in our time, including the social contract between police departments, and the communities that they serve. And if you vilify, if you paint with so broad a brush that people stop listening, it actually disenables those kinds of conversations. And the thing that was the most challenging for me, which in my prior capacity, my job was to sit silently by and not to have an opinion about many of these things. But guess what, folks? Not my job now. One of the things that was probably the most troubling is that someone who lost a family member in our county jail, something that should never happen. No one should die in an incarceration setting, ever. That should be the goal, and anytime we fail that, we should be contrite and figure out why and make sure it never happens again.
Yeah.
But he has had this mother testify probably close to 10, 11, 12 times before various county board committees. Each time she does so, it is an emotionally devastating experience. And yet the issues that she's testifying about, the resolutions that Mr. Clancy is offering, he knows have zero chance of being adopted. And that, to me, is the root of the problem. It's both exploitative and disregards what might be accomplishable if an actual good faith discussion was being engaged. But he doesn't engage in good faith discussion. He wants to name call and vilify. So I'm happy to say here on the Maggie Daun Show, you have my endorsement, Jarrod Anderson, as Milwaukee County's former corporation counsel. We need people in the state assembly who actually want to get things done and not self-congratulate and engage in, frankly, virtue signaling of the most despicable, exploitative kind while getting absolutely nothing accomplished.
Maggie, I thank you for your endorsement, and I could not agree more. This is a time for building community. This is a time for building consensus, for having hard conversations with people that disagree with you, because you know what? We're going to find common ground. I work for common ground. I know how to find it. This is about compromise. This is about going to the office, making friends, and making coalitions so that we can get things done. It's so important.
Even with people that's some of which I would not consider a friend, I still have a responsibility if I was an elected official to figure out a way to work with that person to get something done instead of patting myself on the back every day for having the most left policy positions or opinions out there. That just isn't getting it done. And it won't get it done if Mr. Clancy is reelected, because our government in the state of Wisconsin on the legislative side will continue to be a mix of Republicans and Democrats. That's the nature of representative democracy. I want to ask you about, you've got 5 different policy areas of interest that you've got on your website, which is, I believe it's Jarrod for Milwaukee. Is that correct? I don't want to get your website wrong. Tell everybody.
JarrodForAssembly.com.
So that's JarrodForAssembly, JarrodForAssembly.com. Tell us about your 4 policy interest areas.
Yeah, so this is the distillation of how I think about the things we need to do, right? And so number 1, it's lowering the cost of healthcare. I have worked in healthcare my entire career, nonprofit healthcare, and what I see time and time again is that folks can get access to pretty good care most of the time, but the amount of debt that folks have to go into to get the procedures that they need, to take an ambulance ride, to do any of the necessary things that they need to feel healthy, it is ludicrous. So we need to focus on lowering the cost of healthcare. We need to make sure schools are safe, secure, and inclusive. Combating reckless driving and gun violence is another priority of mine, and ensuring our communities are prosperous. This means making sure that we can repeal the Wisconsin Rains Act and allow the DNR to promulgate groundwater protection standards that keep our water free of toxins. I mean, this is common sense.
I'm going to have to leave it there. Sorry to interrupt, Jarrod. We will have you back very soon, and we'll continue to dig in. Thanks for being here.